Hello, everyone. Welcome to the CPL Portfolio Cycle Explained session. Thank you for joining us. My name is Safra Najmuddin, and I'll be your co-presenter for this session. I'm a registered early childhood educator and a professional practice analyst at the college. I'm joined today with my colleague.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deb Gores. I'm also a registered early childhood educator and a professional practice analyst with SAFRA, and happy to be co-facilitating today.
Okay, so here's what we'll cover in today's session. We're going to start with an overview of the college and the CPL Portfolio Cycle, and then we'll go over the CPL Portfolio components, followed by portfolio examples and resources. That's our agenda for the session, so let's get started. We're going to start with understanding the importance of lifelong learning in early childhood education. Leadership in our field means embracing lifelong learning. Our professional journey doesn't end with formal education, it continues every day in practice. While structured learning through school, workshops, or conferences happens at specific times, informal learning is constant. Every day brings opportunities to reflect, adapt, and grow. And just as important, lifelong learning often requires unlearning, which means challenging and rethinking our assumptions and beliefs we may have internalized as we gain new insights. We often describe young learners as curious, competent, and rich in potential. The same is true for us as professionals. To serve children, we must nurture our own curiosity and build on our competencies. Lifelong learning allows us to remain flexible, thoughtful, and innovative in our practice. By actively engaging in lifelong learning, we strengthen the quality of the early learning sector. We stay adaptable to the changes in education and society. We apply theory, research, and best practices in real world settings, including our placements. We collaborate with colleagues to create inclusive and equitable environments for all children and families. Lifelong learning is not just about our personal and professional growth, it is also about advancing the entire field. It ensures that we as educators remain well equipped to meet the needs of children, families, and communities in an ever changing society. Okay, now moving on to the role of the College of Early Childhood Educators. This slide highlights how the college fulfills its mandate to serve and protect the public interest as outlined in the Early Childhood Educator Act. This includes the first one being registration requirements, maintaining a public register, establishing and upholding the code of ethics and standards of practice, ensuring continuing competence, managing complaints and discipline processes. Under the continuing competence process, the Continuous Professional Learning Program requires RECEs to engage in lifelong learning, demonstrating their commitment to continually improving their practice. Importantly, fulfilling the requirements of the CPL program is not optional. It is a legal responsibility of all RECEs as set out in the ECE Act. Together, these processes ensure that RECEs are accountable for their practice. They help maintain public trust and protect the integrity of the profession. On this slide, we see an overview of the CPL program. So the college recognizes lifelong learning as essential for professional growth and offers the Continuous Professional Learning Program, which is the CPL program, to support RECEs. Participation in the CPL program is a professional responsibility for all members and is required throughout their membership with the college. This slide, as I mentioned, provides an overview of the CPL program in its completed form. If you are watching this, you're likely ready to begin the portfolio cycle, having already completed the educational components of the CPL program. In this session, Deb and I will guide you through everything you need to know to get started with the portfolio cycle. The portfolio cycle has been designed to streamline the CPL program, making it more straightforward while keeping its core focused on self reflection, self directed learning, and alignment with the principles of the Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice. The cycle spans 1 year, during which RECEs are required to complete at least one professional learning goal. It's important to emphasize that the CPL process is for all RECEs, whether you work full time, part time, supply, or in a non program role. Everyone has the ability to participate meaningfully by reflecting on their practice, setting goals, and engaging in learning that is relevant to their unique context. Through this approach, the portfolio cycle supports every RECE in continuing to grow and contribute to the profession. On this slide, it breaks down what participation in the CPL portfolio cycle looks like in practice. So first, it applies to all RECEs, no matter your role or setting. The process is designed to be flexible so that every educator can engage meaningfully. You'll begin by reflecting on your professional practice, thinking critically about your strengths, your challenges, and areas where you want to grow. From there, you'll choose one learning goal that is personally meaningful and relevant to your context. This ensures the process is not about checking a box, but about making your professional learning purposeful. You then plan and engage in learning experiences that support this goal. These can take many forms, either formal or informal, and should be realistic and achievable within your role. Finally, you'll document your learning and growth over the year. This documentation, again, is not about volume, but about capturing meaningful evidence of how your learning connects back to your goal and your practice. Overall, the focus is on meaningful engagement, not on length or the number of activities. The cycle is there to support you in making intentional connections between your learning and your professional practice. So this slide outlines the two required components of the CPL portfolio cycle. The first piece is the reflection and planning tool, which is designed to support self-assessment and goal setting as part of your professional development. And the next piece, which is the record of your professional learning. This is where you would document your learning activities and track your progress throughout your cycle. On this slide, you'll see a snapshot of what's inside the handbook, which is the reflection and planning tool, which serves as a starting point of the whole process. This tool is completed at the beginning of each new portfolio cycle and can be updated as needed throughout the process. It follows a three-part structure designed to facilitate self-reflection and a review of the code and standard. It helps you to develop one professional learning goal and identify learning opportunities that will support you in achieving this goal. This structured approach ensures that your professional growth is intentional, reflective, and aligned with your ongoing development. So when selecting your CPL goal, start by reflecting on what matters most in your current role or setting. Think about the areas of your practice that spark your curiosity, connect with your passions, or feel important to explore more deeply. Your goal might focus on something you'd like to implement in your work or an area of knowledge you'd like to strengthen. Keeping your goal relevant and realistic to your context will make the process more meaningful. You can also link your CPL goal to learning you've already engaged in. For example, if your employer has identified professional learning priorities, your CPL goal can connect to those. Or if you're furthering your education, you may choose to align your goal with your studies. Your goal can take different forms. It might be knowledge-based, practice-based, or even tied to leadership. For instance, A knowledge-based goal could be, I would like to increase my understanding of the theory of loose parts. And a practice-based goal might be, I'm going to apply my knowledge of the theory of loose parts in my program. Finally, consider sharing your ideas with colleagues or other RECEs in your learning community. Exchanging insights and feedback can help you refine your goal and enrich your learning experience. To help you start thinking about your own CPL goal, here are some examples that illustrate the different ways goals can be framed. So, knowledge building goals focus on expanding what you know. For instance, it could be, I would like to deepen my understanding of inclusive pedagogies, or I will research current approaches to outdoor learning. And practice based goals emphasize learning directly in your role. For example, these could be, I'm going to apply inquiry based learning in my toddler classroom, or I will use reflective journaling weekly to improve my communication with families. And then we also have leadership goals, which involve supporting the growth of others and contributing to your team or community. These might look like, I will lead professional learning conversations with my team, or I will mentor a student in applying learn strategies. Each of these examples show that CPL goals can be flexible and tailored to your role, your interests, and your context. And on this slide, it highlights examples of CPL learning activities, which are also listed in the CPL handbook and on the college's website. These examples show the wide variety RECEs can engage in learning as part of their CPL portfolio. Some options include listening to podcasts or watching documentaries related to your professional interests, joining a community of practice to connect with and learn from peers, engaging in collaborative discussions with colleagues to share insights and experiences, using reflective journaling to track and analyze your learning journey. These are just a few examples. There are many other ways to engage in professional learning. The important thing is to choose activities that align with your learning interests and support your ongoing growth as an RECE. It is also important to remember that RECEs work in diverse roles and settings, and the CPL process is flexible enough to reflect that. For example, a supply RECE might focus on strengthening their knowledge of behavior guidance strategies across different settings and choose CPL activities that help them meet that goal. In contrast, a home-based provider may decide to explore inclusive approaches for working with multi-age groups and select activities that support that specific focus. The flexibility of the portfolio cycle ensures that every RECE, no matter their role, can approach their CPL goal in ways that are meaningful and relevant to their context. I'm now going to hand it over to my colleague, Deb.
Great. Thanks, Safra. Okay, so now we're going to consider some strategies when you're going to choose your CPL activity to support your goal. So a couple of strategies noted here on the slide. A good place to start is to look at section A of your self-reflection that you completed in the reflection and planning tool, because there is a question in there that's going to ask you to reflect on the different ways that you like to learn or that you like to take in knowledge. So that's a good starting place when you're considering the different types of activities that you may want to engage in. You can review the examples of the CPL activities that Safra was just speaking to on the previous slide. So the web of CPL activities to give you some inspiration. Think about what types of learning have worked well for you in the past. So, do you learn well from reading or watching a webinar or engaging in a professional practice discussion? Take some time to explore the available resources either in your practice setting, your work setting, your community, or online. Depending on where you live in Ontario, there might be different community supports or community resources, and there's always a lot of online resources available that you can access for free. Connecting with other colleagues through local or virtual learning networks. So Safra was mentioning in some of the strategies for your goal development to share your goals with your colleagues. And that could be a great opportunity as well to brainstorm with your colleague as well around some CPL activities. And also to pay attention to what's happening within the local environment or virtual learning networks. There's a section in the reflection and planning tool called timelines, and this could be an area where you jot down some ideas, you brainstorm ideas, and you can use that column to plan and adjust your timelines or your CPL activities as needed. There's no required number of hours or activities that you need to complete for a CPL portfolio. So everyone's portfolio is going to look different. Every year might look different, and it's really based on, your time and capacity for learning every year. But as long as you are engaging in some sort of learning, maybe it's 2 activities one year, maybe it's 5 activities another year. There's no minimum or maximum number of hours or activities. And then, of course, choose an activity that best supports your goal. So what's the activity, that's going to help you to work towards accomplishing your portfolio goal? Okay, so now we've covered the reflection and planning tools. So now, you've chosen your goal, you've started to engage in your learning activities or your learning experiences. So that's where the record of professional learning is going to come in. This is the second component of the 2 portfolio components. So the record of professional learning is split into 2 sections. We'll look at section A first, because this is the section that you'll be completing throughout your cycle, so throughout the membership year. So as you're engaging in your professional learning activities, you'll document a brief description of the activity or the experience with dates. So maybe you participated in a community of practice, so you'll note down a brief description of that with the date that you attended. And we're going to go through some examples shortly to help show what exactly this looks like. You're also going to include documentation in section A that demonstrates your engagement in that professional learning activity. So going along with the same example of the community of practice, maybe your documentation is an agenda from that community of practice, and then any notes that you took throughout the discussions. And so that's what you'll write down as your documentation. And then you're also going to include a brief description of your next steps. So the third column there has a couple of prompt reflection questions that's going to support you in thinking about, okay, you've completed this learning activity, so what's next? What does this mean for you? And so spend a couple of moments to jot down some reflections there. So that's section A that you're encouraged to complete as you finished up a learning activity. It's best to, stay on top of that so that a good amount of time doesn't lapse between the learning activity that you engaged in and then having to complete the reflections. And then section B is sort of a wrap-up reflection that you're going to complete towards the end of your portfolio cycle. So when it comes time to renew your membership, when you're documenting or gathering your documentation, the final reflection in section B is really an opportunity to take a moment to pause and reflect on the past year of learning that you did, see all the things that you accomplished, reflect on how your knowledge has advanced or your skills have advanced, and spend some time doing some reflection around that. And then also planning for the upcoming year. So there's a number of reflection questions in section B. You don't have to answer every single one of them. They're really just there as prompts, but they're there to support you with that final reflection. Okay, so similarly to how Safra showed the web of learning activities, here's a web of forms of documentation. So depending on the activity that you choose for yourself, your form of documentation is going to look different. For example, if you are attending workshops or you're attending conferences, you will most likely have an agenda. You'll probably get a certificate. You might have receipts, in confirmation enrollment, those sorts of things. So that would be a great form of documentation for those types of activities. If you're engaging in activities more like listening to podcasts or watching webinars or watching a documentary, some great forms of documentation could be descriptions of what your activity was. So a description of the podcast, a description of the webinar, and then any notes or reflections that you took throughout the process. A reflective practice journal is a great form of documentation that could really be used for any type of learning activity. And your reflective practice journal doesn't always have to be in written format. It could be an audio file, it could be a video file, it could be a PowerPoint, whichever format best suits your learning needs. That would work just fine. And so I encourage you to, pause the recording here maybe and take a couple moments to look at the different forms of documentation that are available here in this image. And one thing I will note when thinking about forms of documentation is I really encourage you to think about it as an opportunity for reflection, right? While certificates are great forms of documentation for certain types of learning activities, they are not required. And I really encourage you to think about your reflection on the learning activity as a really great form of documentation that can always be used for any learning activity. Okay, so now we're going to go through a couple of examples of a continuous professional learning activity and then the related form of documentation. So the overall goal here, so the continuous professional learning goal is to enhance my knowledge on Indigenous education to meet the diverse needs of the preschoolers in my care. So that's the goal. And then there's a number of different examples here of an activity and a form of documentation. So we'll go through these together. So the first one there is that one RECE reviewed the practice guideline on diversity and culture, which is a college resource. And so the way that they documented their learning was they referenced the resource, so they could just include that hyperlink there. They included any notes that they took as they were reading through that practice guideline. Maybe they, downloaded the practice guideline and made notes directly in the resource, or they made notes separately. So whichever option they did, they would include that. And then they also used the pause and reflect questions throughout the practice guideline. And they filled in their responses. And so they're including that as well as their form of documentation. Another example from another RECE related to the same goal is that they listened to a podcast. So they listened to episode 58 of Moving Beyond Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging of Leading Inspired Learning, which is a Stride podcast. So the way that they documented their learning was that they referenced this podcast. Maybe they included a little description, of the podcast that's usually available. And then they included their notes. So the notes they took on the key points, key takeaways, the highlights from that podcast. Another example is another RECE read Two-Eyed Seeing article. And so they made note of the article that they read, and then they included the notes again. So notes they took either directly in the article or separately. They've included that as their form of documentation. Another RECE decided to participate in a conversation on quality pedagogy and inclusive practice in early learning by citywide training. And so this was more of a workshop style activity. So the way that they decided to document their learning was that they included the enrollment confirmation. So that was an email that they received. So they've included that. And then they also included their notes from the group discussion that they were engaged in. And then lastly, related to the same goal of enhancing my knowledge on Indigenous education, another RECE participated in nurturing childhoods through Indigenous ways of knowing, which is a course by the University of British Columbia. And they included their certificate of completion from this course as their form of documentation. And then they also shared the weekly activities. So throughout the course, they had to engage in a number of different activities weekly. And so they used those activities as their form of documentation. So hopefully these examples help to highlight not only different ways of documenting your learning based on the learning activity that you engaged in, but also the different types of learning activities that you can engage in related to one goal. And if you would like to check out some of these examples, they are hyperlinked directly on this slide. So you would be able to click on the example directly and it will take you to that source. Okay, so the next couple of slides here, we are going to look at some examples of a continuous professional learning goal, a learning opportunity, and then a form of the way that it was documented, the form of documentation. However, we've created these examples based on employment setting because a common question that we receive is, how do I do my CPL portfolio based on where I'm working? For example, someone who might not be working directly with children and families, someone who might not be working in the sector right now. And so we thought it would be helpful to highlight different or common employment settings and the way that an RECE working in that environment might complete their portfolio. So I'm going to go through these two examples here. And then on the next 3 slides, I encourage you to pause the recording and take a couple moments to spend some time reviewing the examples and reflecting on them. In particular, finding an employment setting that maybe relates to your own employment setting and spending some time reviewing those. So let's look at the first one here. So childcare setting. So this could be an RECE, working in licensed childcare, working in home-based childcare. And the goal that they've set for themselves is to gain practical strategies on supporting children with self-regulation, particularly during transition times. The learning opportunity or the learning activity that they've chosen is that they've chose to watch a conversation with Dr. Jean Clinton on understanding children's emotions in extraordinary times. This is a video available on the college's website, and they reflected on how the strategies that Dr. Jean Clinton was sharing could be applied to their own practice. The form of documentation that they've used is they attached a video link, and then they included any detailed notes that they took as they were watching this video. And they also included a short paragraph documenting the application of one of the strategies that Dr. Jean Clinton shared in this video and the results that they observed when they applied this strategy in their program. The next example is highlighting an RECE who's working in a child and family support program. So for example, maybe an RECE working in an early on environment. The goal that they've chosen for themselves is to enhance inclusive engagement practices that reduce power imbalances and strengthen family involvement. The learning activity they've chose is they read the practice note on professional relationships, which is a college resource available on the college's website. And then they facilitated a team discussion on ways to strengthen culturally responsive family engagement. And the form of documentation is that they attached the resource link. So they included the hyperlink to the resource. And then they included a summary of the discussion. So the team discussion that they led. They developed a summary from that and a personal reflection on how their approaches changed based on that resource and the conversation they had with their team. So hopefully this helps to highlight, different employment settings, different goals, and then a learning opportunity and a way to document your learning. So the next slide, here we have an employment setting of kindergarten and children's services. So for example, RECE is working in child welfare, children's mental health. So if these employment settings apply to you, feel free to pause the recording here and spend some time reviewing and reflecting on these examples of a goal, a learning opportunity, and a form of documentation. Okay, so the employment settings highlighted here are post-secondary. So RECE is working in a post-secondary environment, and RECE is working in policy-based environments. So perhaps in government, administrative roles. So if any of these employment settings apply to you, again, feel free to pause the recording here, or even if they don't apply to you, I encourage you to pause the recording here and spend some time reviewing these goals, examples of a goal, learning activity, and form of documentation. Okay, and finally, the last bit of examples here to highlight are for RECEs who are not currently employed or who might be working outside of the sector. So maybe you're not working directly with children and families, or you're not working within the sector at all right now. And then for RECEs who are retired. So I encourage you again to pause the recording here, spend some time reviewing and reflecting on these goals and learning opportunities, and perhaps using them as inspiration for your own portfolio. Okay, so hopefully those examples were helpful to you to support your thinking about your portfolio as you gear up to engage in the portfolio cycle, and perhaps act as some inspiration for your own goal development. So now we're going to cover some tips for completing your CPL portfolio. I've mentioned a couple times that there's a number of prompt questions throughout the components. So in the reflection and planning tool and in the record of professional learning. The prompts are going to be the questions in the shaded callout boxes. So there's pink or blue shaded callout boxes. And know that you do not have to answer all of these questions. The prompts are really there to support you if you want to go a bit deeper in your reflection, or if you're being a bit challenged by some of the questions, or just need a little extra curiosity for your reflection. So those are some great opportunities when you might engage with those prompts, but know that you don't have to answer every single question. And then know that we also have a lot of resources to support you specifically with your portfolio, and that you can use for your portfolio as learning activities. So in regards to CPL portfolio resources, we have a resource on goal development. We have a resource on topic ideas. So different ideas that different areas that you might want to focus in for your CPL portfolio. We have portfolio process snapshots, which are very similar to the slides where we showed an example of a goal, a learning activity, and a form of documentation. And then we do have fully filled out portfolios on the website as well, highlighting RECEs who are working in different areas of the sector, and a number of CPL video resources that are available on our YouTube channel. And then we have practice resources that you can absolutely use towards or as an activity for your portfolio. So a number of the examples that we were sharing previously highlight different college resources that RECEs have used as an activity. So definitely encourage you to check those out on our website. We have practice guidelines, practice notes, scenarios, case studies, reflection guides, professional advisories, and a number of video resources as well. Okay, so when it comes to maintaining your CPL portfolio, a couple of things to consider. How you maintain your portfolio is really up to you. You can download or print the handbook, or just the portfolio components. You can request a mailed hard copy of the CPL handbook. You can reach out to us at cpl@college-ece.ca if this is something that you're interested in. Choosing the format that of your CPL portfolio, choose one that works best for your learning style. So I personally maintain my portfolio fully online. So I've downloaded the components and I've saved them in PDF, and I have them in a folder on my desktop. Some people prefer to work in hard copy, so they're either going to print out the components or they're going to request a hard copy that could be mailed to them. Some people like to have a mix of both, where they have some stuff in hard copy and then some stuff online. So it is completely up to you, and choosing the format that works best for your learning style is recommended. And then it's important that you're keeping your completed portfolios for 2 membership years, and that is for auditing purposes. Okay, so just want to highlight some recommended timelines as you're thinking about the year and how you can break it up. So in the first couple of months, some of you listening to this recording might be in this time frame right now. So maybe you just renewed your membership and it's time for you to start your CPL portfolio. So you'll want to start by completing that reflection and planning tool. That's a great goal to do within the first couple of months. You engage in your reflection, develop a goal for yourself, and then you can start thinking about the activities that you might want to engage in over the next year. Then for the good middle chunk of your membership year, so months 3 to 10, that's when you're going to be participating and engaging in your learning activities and experiences. And don't forget to complete Section A of that record of professional learning, as you're engaging in your learning activities and experiences on a needed basis. And then towards the end of your CPL portfolio cycle, so the last couple months before you renew your membership, this is a good opportunity to spend some time just collating your documentation, ensuring all the things are there that you need, and then spending some time to complete that reflection in Section B of the Record of Professional Learning, taking some time to just reflect on the year and start thinking about the next year. Okay, I want to highlight the continuous professional learning deferral here due to extenuating circumstances. So RECEs have the opportunity to request a CPL deferral for extenuating circumstances that are interfering with their ability to complete their continuous professional learning requirement for the year. So some examples of extenuating circumstances could be maternity or parental leave, illness, disability, bereavement, or personal hardship. So the way you would start a CPL deferral request is through my college account. So you'll have to log into my college account. You'll click on the Continuous Professional Learning tab there that you can see on the screen. And then if you scroll to the very bottom of that page, you will see a box that says deferrals, and you click on the button that says Start CPL Deferral Request. This will bring you to a request form. You'll have to fill out the form online, and then it will be sent to a college staff who will review your deferral request, and they will be in communication with you within about a month to support you throughout that deferral request process. And typically a deferral request would defer your CPL requirements for a membership year. So it would basically put it on pause, and then you would pick up where you left off after that year. Also want to highlight some information when it comes time for renewal. So all our ECEs have to renew their membership once a year. And on your renewal form, you are going to come across a question related to the continuous professional learning program, where you will have to declare whether or not you have complied, you've completed your CPL requirement for the past membership year. So this is an example of what the question looks like on that renewal form. So it's going to say, I confirm that I have complied with the CPL program requirements for this past membership year as outlined in the notice of CPL program requirements. So remembering that the continuous professional learning program is a legal requirement of all our ECEs, regardless of where your practice setting is or your role. And so it is important that you're answering this question honestly. So if you have completed your CPL requirements, you check off yes. If you've completed your portfolio and you're good to go, you would check off yes to this question. If you haven't completed your portfolio, it's important that you are being honest and checking no to this question. So what would happen if you do respond no? It will not prevent your renewal from being processed if all other renewal criteria has been met. What will happen is that someone from the college will reach out to you to support you in completing your portfolio within a specific time frame. And so it's important to make note here that if you haven't completed your portfolio, but you're checking off yes, that is an example of making a false declaration, and it could be considered as professional misconduct. Okay, just want to highlight the continuous professional learning program audit here. So the college does conduct an audit process to review members' CPL portfolio records, confirm member compliance with the program, and also to collect data to inform resource development and communications. It's an opportunity to check in with members to assess what their understanding is of the portfolio, and also an opportunity to see what the different types of topics are that members are focusing in on, and that could help inform future resource development as well. Audit notices are sent by email, and members have 30 days to submit the following CPL portfolio documents to the college if they are selected for an audit. They would have to submit reflection and planning tool, the record of professional learning, as well as the documentation or evidence to demonstrate participation in the professional learning activities. And if you were selected for an audit, all of this information would be provided in the email, including what to submit, how to submit it, by when you have to submit it, and the consequences of not submitting the required components for the audit. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the content that we had to share with you today around the portfolio cycle. Just want to highlight some CPL program information and support here before we wrap up. You can always visit our website. All of the resources that we've mentioned throughout this webinar today can be found on our website, in addition to the videos and the recordings. All CPL program information and resources can also be found on our website. We have a link to our YouTube channel there, as well as where the practice resources are housed. And it's important that you review your emails from the college. Email is the #1 way we communicate with members. So we are always sending information bits or strategies or links to resources. So stay tuned and check your emails regularly for that information. And please know that if you ever have questions related to the continuous professional learning program or practice in general, please know that you can always contact us either by phone. Our number is there on the slide, and you would select option 2 to be directed to the professional practice department, or you can always email us at cpl@college-ece.ca, and know that we are here to support you in your professional practice, in your ongoing learning journey. and with any other aspect of related to being a registered early childhood educator as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this webinar today, and we hope it was helpful. Take care, everyone.